Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Strong Her Way. It's Alicia. Let me ask you this. How many times have you tried the latest diet trend, maybe even one of those complicated intermittent fasting protocols, only to quit because it felt extreme, rigid, or downright unsustainable for you and your lifestyle? I've seen it, I've lived it. As a busy mom, I remember trying to juggle crazy fasting windows and strict eating rules while cooking dinner for my kids, and it felt impossible. Honestly, a lot of those hacks started to look and feel like eating disorder behaviors in disguise, teaching me to ignore my body's natural hunger cues, obsessing over the clock, over food, and just creating more stress around food instead of the freedom that I craved. That's why instead of implementing these ridiculous intermittent fasting protocols, I actually started using what's called time restricted eating, or TRE, instead. It stripped away all the hype and trying to figure out what type of eating window worked best for me, and really gave me something simple because it was honestly something I could use while I was sleeping. Time restricted eating isn't about punishing yourself. It's definitely not about starving yourself or just skipping meals to the point of misery. It's also not about obsessively tracking, which I think is part of what makes this strategy so successful for so many people. It's really about aligning when you eat with your body's natural rhythm, so with your circadian rhythm, so that you spend less time stressing about food and more time actually enjoying it, because that's what we're all about. So for busy moms like us, this can be a game changer. It can definitely be a tool you want to consider adding into your arsenal. There's no crazy apps required. There's no complicated rules, not even really any calculations that you have to consider. Really, just a straightforward way to support your energy, your health, and maybe even your sanity. This especially is going to work if you are trying to lose some weight or if you're on a fat loss journey. Then using time restricted eating can be a super simple way to just reduce overall calorie intake, which we'll dive into a little bit. But before we dive into the science, let's talk about why most women are frustrated and why time restricted eating could be the game changer they're looking for. So, if you're like so many of the moms that I work with, you're probably tired, you're juggling kids, your work, your family, and a thousand other commitments and responsibilities. And on top of it, you're supposed to track every single bite that you put into your mouth, weigh food, log into your fitness pal, or use these fancy fasting apps, and somehow have all the energy left to exercise, to be present with your kids, and to be a good mom. Now, I'm not dogging any of those tools in specific, but I think that a lot of times we think in order to get any sort of result, we have to be implementing all of the things and we have to be doing it perfectly rather than just focusing in on a few key things. There might absolutely be times where weighing your food or using a log or a food journal are tools that you're going to want to implement. Those are things that I use personally from time to time. They're things that I work with my clients on as well. So it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But if you are feeling bogged down and overwhelmed by having to do everything and feeling like you have to do it perfectly, my hope with this episode is to show you how time restricted eating could honestly be a very simple, easy, straightforward way and tool to just start implementing without having to do the fasting. For me, honestly, it's so much easier to think about fasting when most of that fasted window is going to be while I'm asleep anyway. So, most diets really only focus on what you eat. So, that could be cutting out carbs, eating a crazy low amount of calories, tracking your macros, cutting out certain food groups altogether, but they are not really talking about when you eat. So a lot of times they're completely ignoring when you're eating. And timing is or can be powerful because your body runs on rhythms. As women, if we are still menstruating, we have that monthly rhythm, that monthly cycle, but every single day we have that 24-hour cycle as well. And so it kind of makes sense that we're eating for the most part when we're awake. And then as we're starting to gear down or wind down and get ready for bed, we want to be eating less and allowing our body that time to go into that rest and digest stage. So if everything else is kind of running on rhythms and seasons, I mean, we can look outside and see that seasons are changing. why would we not also want to think about aligning when we're eating with a rhythm or a pattern as well? So, this can help with things like hormones, digestion, and even fat burning. So, when we're eating outside of those rhythms, so if you have kind of that late night snack attack, that's not really when your body is wanting to be awake and is wanting to eat and break down food. So, it can kind of throw things off. Now, I've been learning a little bit more about circadian rhythms, and what I am learning is that there are natural kind of night owls or those late night people, and there are those natural, more early bird people that like to get up in the morning. And so, as best as we can, we want to try to align our life with that. So, if you are somebody that tends to be more of that night owl, then your eating window might definitely shift just depending on when you wake up and when you go to bed. On the flip side of that, if you tend to find yourself as being more of an early bird, then your eating window is going to adjust as well. And I think where we get into trouble is when we're staying up too late if we're more of that early bird person, or we're trying to force ourselves to be that early morning person when maybe naturally you're more of a night owl. And so just thinking about ways that you can intentionally kind of shift your lifestyle to support your natural rhythm. So, to be frank, there really was this short period of time where I tried intermittent fasting. I thought this was going to help with all of these health things, or this was going to help with these goals, only to find that my energy actually was super low, super tanked because I was still doing pretty heavy workouts. I was thinking about food all the time. So, for me, really being on this like restrictive eating window had me thinking about food all the time. When can I eat? When's my eating window going to open up? And I just noticed that I was starting to count down the minutes to where I could eat again, which was a total flashback to my bodybuilding days. And because I do have a history of disordered eating, potentially even borderline eating disorder, this kind of strict and restriction around food did not and does not work for me. So if you're somebody that has a history of eating disorder, disordered eating tendencies, then I would say to approach any sort of fasting with caution. And that's really where I would say moving away from intermittent fasting and thinking more about time restricted eating, where we're just closing the window maybe a little bit earlier in the evening, maybe stretching it a little bit further in the morning, could be a really great way to kind of get some of the benefits of fasting without it triggering these negative net consequences. And for me, when I was trying this fasting, the IF, it really just felt like I was going against all that I had worked so hard to accomplish in healing my relationship to food. Whereas TRE, time restricted eating, gave me the best of both worlds. One where I was closing my window, let's say for 12 hours, I could reap some of those fasting benefits, but was also not going overboard and potentially causing more harm than good. And this is exactly why inside the Strong Her Way group coaching program, I don't just hand women a meal plan or a workout program and say, okay, here you go, like go do it. That's the way I used to do my coaching. And that's the way I see a lot of fitness coaches still doing their coaching. And that just doesn't work. If we could simply follow a meal plan, simply follow a workout program, then we wouldn't even need coaches because you could go to Google, you could go to ChatGPT. But the reality is that the magic really happens inside of the coaching, because it's not necessarily just what we're doing, but it's the why and it's the how behind that. And so part of that group coaching inside the Strong Her Way is really learning how to build rhythms and systems that align with your life, your preferences, your goals, and your hormones. And time restricted eating is definitely one of those tools that we talk about and we utilize. All right, let's break this down. So, what is TRE? Why does it work? And how can you start using it today without making your life more busy or complicated than it needs to be? So, what is TRE? Let's dive into some of the benefits here. It simply means that you're eating all of your meals within a set daily window. So this could be anywhere from 6 hours to 10 hours. Some of the research that I'm seeing for women is more like don't go longer than 12 to 14 hours. So 14 hours kind of being the max. Of course, you're going to run into people that are using all sorts of intermittent fasting protocols and they might be getting great results. So this is one of those things where I'm going to say this is not medical advice. I'm not a medical doctor for sure. Just to cover my tush, talk to your medical provider before implementing this or anything that you are learning on the show here. But there is kind of this benefit to looking at yourself as sort of the N of one and just running it as an experiment. If you try intermittent fasting and you're really going to that 6 hour window, that means you've got 18 hours where you're not eating. That may work great for you. You may find that you're having some net negative results. That's going to be an indicator that that's not actually going to be something that works for you long term. So, ideally, we're not going more than 12 to 14 hours as a woman. But again, play with it, kind of see how you feel, see what you notice. If your sleep, your hunger, your mood, your energy, and your cravings are good, then you might be okay to do a little bit of a longer window. Again, check with your healthcare provider on that. So here's what some of the research is saying. In terms of fat loss and metabolism, there are studies that show that TRE can improve insulin sensitivity, reduce body fat, and support weight management, even without strict calorie counting. I honestly think one of the reasons that this can help so much with fat loss or weight loss is because if we're only allowing ourselves to eat within a certain period of time, like a certain eating window, then we're not going into the kitchen for those late night snacks, which, if we're being really honest with ourselves, those late night snacks are usually never like, something with protein and fiber. For me, a lot of times when I'm going into the kitchen, it's for goldfish, it's for crackers, it's for something sweet, something kind of high in those carbs. And so simply just like closing that window, you're probably going to consume less calories, and you're probably most certainly going to consume less calories that tend to add to our waistline or be something that could be prohibitive of fat loss and weight loss. Now, something to note here with the insulin sensitivity is that if you find yourself in perimenopause or maybe going through menopause, it's important to note that women tend to become more insulin resistant anyway. I am not 100% sure why this is. I think some of what I'm hearing or some of what I'm recalling is that it can have something to do with our muscle mass, which is another reason it is so important to start lifting as early as possible, lifting heavy, lifting with the focus of building strength and muscle, and not necessarily lifting weights for calorie burn or even getting that toned look. Although that can definitely be like a benefit or a side effect. But we want to have the muscle because that can help with insulin sensitivity. Energy and sleep. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but by eating in sync with your specific circadian rhythm, your energy is going to stabilize and your sleep is going to improve. Some of the reason that we might have sleep problems just comes from eating too close to bedtime. And so we're trying to digest food when we're actually trying to sleep. The body has those kind of rest and digest periods, which is sort of the parasympathetic. That's what we want to be doing while we're sleeping. But if we're eating, if we're stressed, if our brain is working, it sort of interrupts that, which of course is going to have a negative impact on our sleep and then our energy the following day. Simplicity. So just having that window where it's like, okay, if I'm only eating between, let's say, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., and I'm predominantly focusing on protein and fiber first at my meals, then that really can alleviate for a lot of people the need for tracking and weighing food. You're just picking a window, and your goal would be to eat whole foods or minimally processed foods inside of that window. Again, obviously, if you're listening to the show, I'm going to say prioritizing your protein and your fiber, keeping everything minimally processed. That can be a really easy way to simplify food, which is perfect for a lot of moms who either don't have a ton of time to track, or again, if you have a history of disordered eating, eating disorder, and getting too nitty gritty in the numbers sometimes can be a really unhealthy space mentally and emotionally. Hormones and inflammation. A time restricted eating can support cortisol regulation, lower inflammation markers, gut health. So your gut, because it's not trying to digest food all of the time, actually gets a break. It gets a chance to heal during those fasting windows. Diversity and repair in the gut health or in the gut bacteria can go up too when you give your digestion a break. So we've talked briefly about gut health and digestion on the show, but essentially we have all of these different gut microbes and microbiome. I'm not actually sure what the real technical term is there inside of our guts, inside of our gut, and it needs different types of food. It also needs some rest. So it needs time to repair. It needs diversity, which is why it's so important to make sure we're getting a variety of different plants throughout the week. So, really, some of the magic, as you just learned in fasting, really lies simply in just eating less calories overall. So, if your goal is fat loss or weight loss, that's where time restricted eating can come in. If you're looking for maybe more balance in your hormones or sleep or something like that, then again, this can aid with that. And one of the reasons that it can be so effective is just because we're decreasing the amount of time we can eat, the types of food that we might be prone to eat later in the day, and just overall amount of food. I think another bit of magic that oftentimes gets overlooked in this conversation is some of the spiritual and the emotional benefits that can happen when we're fasting. So I'm a firm believer that when we take something away, you really get to see what's underneath the behavior, what's driving you in that behavior emotionally. In this case, we're talking about eating. So, if we're closing our eating window and we know that we have a history of nighttime snacking or habitual eating after we put the kids to bed, I might be speaking from some personal experience there in the past. When we remove that, then we're left with all of the reasons why we were turning to the food or why we were going into the kitchen at night in the first place. So, fasting can help us kind of take the focus off of food and maybe allows us to redirect that focus, that attention towards God and praying, and really just could be an opportunity to practice denying your flesh in that moment. And I've seen this firsthand inside the Strong Her Way, inside of the coaching, when women adopt time restricted eating or when they decide to abstain or kind of fast from something for a little bit, they start to really see a lot of that emotional and mental drive toward that behavior. And that really shows us where the work is. It's not necessarily in trying to just fix the symptom, fix the external behavior, but really getting to the root of it and the heart of it. And just by simplifying it and saying, okay, I'm only going to eat between this time and this time, it makes food feel way less stressful. They have more energy. They start noticing maybe things that are stimulating fat loss, and it feels a lot more natural, a lot less forced, and a lot less hard, especially when we layer in the identity work. So, doing that neuro identity rewire is really the foundation, and it's what helps those habits and those behaviors stick long term. Okay, so now you know what it is and why it works. The next question is, when is the best time to eat and what should those meals look like specifically? So, some research indicates that earlier windows, like maybe 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., tend to align best with your body's fat burning and sleep hormones. But if that doesn't work for your life, then don't stress and don't try to force yourself into that cookie cutter. A 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. window still provides huge benefits. Like I said earlier, I think that 12 to 14-hour window can be a sweet spot. Maybe you start with like a 10-hour eating window, or I guess we'd go, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the math while I'm talking. But essentially, I think what you would want to do is maybe start with a bigger eating window, see how that goes, and then slowly kind of shrink that down. And as long as you're not noticing any negative results, then, and you're kind of seeing the results that you want, and you're noticing that you're feeling better, then that's a great way to kind of experiment and find an eating window that's going to work for you. I think you have to really consider your schedule and your life as well. Again, I'm up pretty early, and a lot of times I am hungry when I first wake up or within the first 30 minutes or so, especially if I don't eat after 6 o'clock or 6:30 the night before. So trying to stay within that 12-hour window for myself personally, but sometimes it adjusts and it's not always perfect. I think the real win with this or with anything is consistency, and it's finding what you can do consistently. So now what to eat, remembering that time restricted eating isn't necessarily like a permission slip or a free for all, a free pass on eating whatever we want whenever we want to. I think that kind of mentality towards food doesn't actually create freedom. It doesn't actually put us in the driver's seat. We're still kind of slaves, or we're still being controlled by our appetite and by food with that mentality. So thinking quality still and maybe more potentially matters more. So thinking lean protein with every meal, at least a palm-sized serving, if not more, especially if you're really working on building muscle, fiber-rich veggies, healthy fats like your avocado, your olive oil, nuts and seeds, and then focusing on whole foods over processed foods. Because here is the truth. We cannot outtime junk food. We cannot outtrain kind of a cruddy diet if it's just filled with mostly ultra processed foods. Now, again, not demonizing those foods, but just trying to be real with the fact that those foods are designed to keep us eating. They are not designed with our health, with our longevity, or with our weight in mind. So, just really thinking about, if you are choosing to eat ultra processed foods, I think first and foremost, making sure that you're eating things that you enjoy, that you're doing it mindfully, and that maybe you have some guardrails up, especially if that can be a slippery slope for you. Time restricted eating is really about timing. And I want you to think about nourishing and fueling your body, feeding it like you love it, feeding it like you respect it, and like you care about it. That doesn't mean from time to time we don't get to enjoy a cookie or a donut or a slice of cake. But I think it's just being real about what foods actually make us feel better and what foods give us the energy to really go out and do the things we want to do in this world. So, when working with a client on TRE in the past, we also wanted to focus on the type and quality of food that she was eating. So, again, it's not just a free for all, eat whatever you want to eat within that eating window, as long as you're not eating outside of it. But really thinking about, okay, what's the eating window you want to eat within? And then prioritizing that protein, the fiber, healthy fats, especially if you're keeping to a tighter eating window, because you're not going to have as much time to get all of the calories, all of the nutrients that your body needs. So we want to make sure that those meals that you are eating are as packed with nutrition, with nutrients and nourishment as possible. And really just, checking in and how does your body feel, making sure that what we're feeding your body is actually nourishing it. It's giving you that energy to go out and tackle life. And this is where I think coaching really can be such a pivotal piece to that and make all the difference. It's having somebody that's outside of you help you kind of pick an eating window that's going to fit within your life, not something that's super unrealistic rather, or extreme. That's one of the things I tend to notice is that when we're left to our own devices, we want to do it all. We want to pick the most extreme and try to implement everything at once. Whereas having that coach, having that external perspective can help you look at things a little bit more neutrally, a little bit more objectively, and really help you navigate what's maybe going to work best for you, person to kind of process with. It's having somebody that can help you design simple meals that can fuel your body without going into that food obsession. It's not about perfection, it's about rhythm and consistency and what you can do for the long haul. So let's talk about how you could get started this week, or how you could start implementing TRE, even if your schedule is crazy. Here is your challenge. I want you to pick one window. If you need just somebody to tell you what to do, either trying that 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., or maybe 10 to 6, or I would say even stretching that out a little bit. Maybe giving yourself, instead of 8 hours, you're giving yourself 10 or 12 hours. So picking that 10 to 12 hour window and sticking with it. So trying it for a day, seeing what you notice, seeing how you felt. Maybe you make the goal or the commitment to yourself to try it for 7 days. So you don't have to think about calories or macros with this. It's just trying to track three things with that eating window: your energy, your hunger, and your mood. I would also say your sleep and your cravings, because this tend to be kind of the five things that I'm asking my clients about. So, how's your sleep? How's your hunger? How's your mood, your energy, and your cravings? This data is going to be so useful for you in helping you navigate and make other decisions moving forward about maybe food choices, timing, the amount of food that you're eating. If you are wanting that step by step guidance, that is where I'm going to extend an invitation for you to reach out to me to learn a little bit more about the Strong Her Way, our coaching, whether you're interested in one-on-one or in more of a group setting. Just reach out to me. I'll have the link to do so in the show notes below. And then this is where, you're really going to learn how to implement this and so many other strategies that you're learning here on the show into your life as a mom: how to fuel your body, how to nourish it, how to move your body, how to get stronger in a safe and healthy way, and really just kind of shifting our mindset around the food, around the scale, around our bodies, and most importantly, potentially just around who we are. So let's recap. Time restricted eating is simple. There's definitely some science that supports it and can be tailored for women who don't have tons of hours to meal prep or track every bite. Without it, you might just end up keep spinning your wheels, overwhelmed by all the conflicting advice, low energy, or maybe even stalled fat loss. By utilizing it in a strategic and appropriate way for your life and your body, you can definitely simplify your routine around food, notice boosts of energy, and finally start to see results that last. Remember, your health doesn't have to be complicated, but it does need to be aligned with you, with your preferences, with your goals, and with your life. I'm cheering you on here from the Strong Her Way. And if you're ready to stop stressing about food and finally feel in control again, make sure you connect with me if you're interested in learning about either the group coaching or one on one, or if you just want to know what free resources I have for you, go ahead and reach out to me. So either Alisha at AlishaCarlson.com or fill out that form in the description below. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, an amazing week, and until next time. Bye.